coverage. So the South Bend Tribune has got an article. Now, this is a viewpoint article. These are the ones that come from the public. South Bend police are listening, so should activists. This is a retort to the ludicrous claim last week that police should disarm when they go to these public meetings because it's insensitive and insulting, and it basically intimidates the public. I am writing in response to the viewpoint August 15th, expressing the opinion South Bend police officers should not wear their department sidearms to the SBPD community meetings. I am the attorney for the St. Joseph County Police Department, and we've recently heard similar statements about sidearms when the sheriff and our county officers attend community meetings. The opinion article and the statements are made in a vacuum and do not take into consideration the situations and legal requirements that our police officers must deal with. The opinion writer states, regardless of on-duty or off-duty, the police wearing their sidearms was done out of insensitivity, possibly intimidation, and that the police, quote, distrust us enough to wear firearms. In one aspect, one point the writer makes is correct. Whether the officers were off-duty or on-duty does not matter. Our police officers are required by department rules to wear a sidearm, whether off-duty or on-duty. Told you. You might wonder why that rule exists. The rule exists because our officers are always on call. Department rules require them to listen to police radio traffic and respond when crises occur, and the department needs additional officers. Also, it is common for an off-duty officer to witness or come across an incident such as theft or a car accident, which requires some action by the off-duty officer. How many times have we covered stories where it's an off-duty officer that did something? So again, the attorney for the St. Joseph County Police Department is, in fact, confirming everything that I have said. Many dispatch calls for service come from an off-duty officer radioing in dispatch for an on-duty officer. And most crucially, regardless of whether on-duty or off-duty, an officer can face potential criminal charges, discipline, or civil litigation for failing to act to an incident. Also, told you, went over this last week, they are legally required to act whether on or off duty. Our officers cannot risk being unable to take action. The families and friends of our officers will tell you that they are never really off duty. Wherever they go, they are scanning the store or restaurant, keeping their eyes on the door and suspicious activity. As for the statements that the police distrust us enough to wear firearms, this is divisive and counterproductive and is made without listening or understanding of legal requirements on police officers. Police officers have a greater understanding of our own community than most of us. They go everywhere in our community, see people in their darkest hour, and are witnesses to great tragedy and horrible trauma. Now, when that statement was in the article, one of the things that I pointed out is I'm willing to bet that the author of the article and Eric Logan's brother, whom the article was written on behalf of, I'm willing to bet that they lock their door at night. And if they do lock their door at night, then they don't trust their neighbors. And so they don't trust their neighbors, and yet they're expecting the police department to trust their neighbors. It's kind of interesting how that works, right? I also attended this meeting. Many of the comments at the meeting were made with little understanding of the legal requirements or the discipline process of police officers, ignored the reality of the situation our officers deal with every day, and spread misinformation. At the end of the meeting, the comment that more police officers should be here was made to the whole gym. I agree, more officers need to talk about what they go through each day and why they do what they do. However, the community and activists must also listen and attempt to understand, which clearly the ones that show up at these meetings are not interested in doing. Now, I'm saying that, not the author here. Let's see. Our community will only heal when the listening and understanding are two-way. The police department is listening and attempting to understand those pushing for change. However, those pushing for change must also listen and attempt to understand the police department or its officers. And as I pointed out over the past several of these meetings, there is no attempt to do so. These are purely community activists who are trying to gain name recognition, financial benefit, what have you. They're not there to actually improve relations, ladies and gentlemen. If the activists continue to use verbal accusations and attacks on all police officers, not much healing will happen. South Bend needs good police officers, and so far, much of what has taken place has just stoked the fires, divided our community, and chased off good police officers. If the activists really want cooperative change, they need to not only protest and speak out, but also listen and attempt to understand. As Troy Warner, again, he's the attorney for the St. Joseph County Police Department. All right, so here's Here's another thing. South Bend Police Department is going around mowing lawns this week, right? So how many of these community activists do you think are going to hop on board with that and go help their community and mow some lawns for people who can't mow their lawns, or lawns that are at properties that are vacated, in order to make their community look better? How many of them do you think are going to do that? Exactly. Dan, welcome to the program. Good afternoon.
Hello.
What's up?
I'm calling about the police being armed.
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing. Many of these police, I know several police in St. Joe County, and they have had their lives threatened by gang members, by family members when they've had to make an arrest, when they have to testify. And these people that have their nose out of joint because the cop's wearing a gun when it comes to a meeting, it has nothing to do with the people in that meeting at that time. He has to come, he has to go, he has a life to live, and that's the reason they carry a gun quite often.
Well, of course. There used to be a charity, I don't know if they're still around, there used to be a charity that would document the attempts on police officer and their families' lives nationally. And it happens all the time. And like I said, you're a police officer. Now, can you imagine, Dan, what would happen if we found out that there was a community event involving police officers and none of the officers there were going to be armed? Can you imagine what would happen? I mean, obviously, bad guys would target that. I mean, if you can take out several officers in one evening, you decimate a police department and you'd have free run of the city for a while. There's no doubt that they would absolutely be targets if people knew that they were showing up unarmed. One of the reasons that people don't bother them all that much is they know that they're armed. So yeah, this would be this. Like I said, it was written by an idiot on behalf of an idiot who's the brother of an idiot who tried to kill a cop. And so when I went out there and called him a pathetic snowflake, it was funny. The author sent me, I know you're not calling Eric Logan's brother a pathetic snowflake. Actually, I'm calling you a pathetic snowflake. But if those are really his words, then yeah, he is. I'm sorry that his brother tried to kill a cop and wouldn't listen to reason. Maybe he was on dope or something. I think they were still waiting for that. But the reality of the situation is he was a bad guy, and a bad guy had a knife and wouldn't drop the knife, and he got shot. Sorry. That's how things go.
That's right.
If you don't want to get shot, don't draw a knife on a police officer. Really isn't that difficult, right?
No, that's right. And I've talked to a cop who looked like during the summer he was wearing a little bit of a purse or a small camera bag, and he's saying, "Well, I got to do this. My life's been threatened."
Sure.
And it may look a little odd, but that's the situation.
Hey, however, you got to carry your boomstick with you, right?
That's right.
All right, Dan. Appreciate it, bud. You take care.
Okay, bye.
All right. But this is the thing, and everything that I told you when we talked about this, which maybe it was longer than just a week ago, but everything that I have told you when we talked about this was just confirmed by the attorney for the St. Joseph County Police Department. They're required to be armed and everything else, but they also go into some of the other stuff that I've said, which is these community meetings. None of these activists who show up actually care about fixing everything. I would go back to something that happened with Black Lives Matter a couple of years ago. There was a Black Lives Matter chapter. I forget where this was, but there was a Black Lives Matter chapter, and they were going to have a barbecue. It was a community barbecue with the local police department. And it was a way for, this group that protests police abuse and police who are often falsely accused of abuse. Now, abuse happens, and we call it out every time we know that it happens. But in fact, I have a story for you today about police abuse that is really disturbing. So you've got, Black Lives Matter in this local chapter. You got the police department, and they said, we're going to get together and we're going to invite the community to come hang out with both sides as we barbecue with one another. And we're going to go ahead and mend this friction that we have in the community. And the response from the National Black Lives Matter outfit was that these weren't real Black Lives Matter activists. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it was we eat bacon, we don't eat with bacon. And it just became a whole brouhaha about all of this. And ultimately, this is just a group. Finally, a local chapter of Black Lives Matter that was taking this seriously and was actually trying to mend fences, and a police department that was willing to do it as well. And you had the organization basically saying, no, we don't associate with people who do that, because we're not about that. We're not about mending fences, and they're not about mending fences. They're about seizing power. They're about oppressing police activity and authority. And of course, they can make a buck or a name for themselves, then so be it. Why do you think the South Bend Tribune published a whole article about community activists in South Bend that you need to learn about and pay attention to. It's to push their fame. And what did community activists get paid to do? Stir up controversy. Like I said, everything that we have with the Eric Logan thing is that it was justified shooting. Everything that we have. There isn't anything that goes against that. Nothing. And yet, we've got a semi-national scandal about it. We've got the police department doing these community meetings, and then we've got people associated with these community meetings pitching a fit because the officers are armed. Like I said, what do you think would happen if a bunch of bad guys in South Bend knew that a large chunk of the department were going to be at these meetings, including the sheriff, or not sheriff, excuse me, police chief, think of county and then city again. They were going to show up at these meetings and they were going to be unarmed. What do you think would happen? It's an open target. It's an absolute open target. There's no way in the world I would ever endorse anything like that, nor would any of the police officers, thank God. We got more coming up. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.